Do you often get stuck in the middle of cases? Do you feel inconfident driving through them? Or are you just totally confused about how the heck a candidate-led case works? Well, this video is for you. Following the good foundation of the Case Interview 101 video, we'll talk about each extreme end of the spectrum. And in this one, let's tackle candidate-led case interviews. Hi, my name is Kim Tran, a former McKinsey consultant, the founder of the platform Management Consulting Prep, and an independent strategic consultant. As I mentioned in the Case Interview 101 video, there's no clear separation line between candidate-led cases and interview-led cases. Most cases fall somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. So whether you like it or not, there's almost always elements of a candidate-led case in every interview you do with management consulting firms. Candidate-led cases are interesting, but also very difficult, especially for beginners. I personally really like these cases because it represents very well how an actual consulting project works and the role of the engagement team in it. So rather than talk specifically about how a candidate-led case works, let me introduce you to the logic behind management consulting problem solving. It's ironic that many experienced candidates, having practiced 20 to 30 cases, actually don't even grasp this very well. That's why even with that much practice, they can still struggle in certain cases and still feel like they need even more practice. Well, practice is good, but only when you've already mastered the basics. So here we go, the core logical foundation of how management consultants solve problems. We talked a little bit about this in the Case Interview 101 video, but here there's a lot more in-depth explanations. To make this as easy to follow as possible, I've divided the whole concept into bite-sized elements with numbers. Element number 1, the problem has got to be defined. At McKinsey, every new hire has to attend a problem-solving training session. If you can sneak in and listen to every one of them every single time, you'll hear that the first thing being taught is to define the problem. You can't solve a problem if you don't know what it is. So for case interviews, the very first thing you should do is to clarify the case context and key questions. This sounds simple enough, but you'll see a lot of examples where good candidates don't do this appropriately in our end-to-end program. Element number 2. To solve a big problem, we, management consultants, don't look for solutions right away. Instead, we try to find the root cause. This ensures that we completely eradicate the problem and that it has a long-lasting impact. Element number 3. There can be millions of possible root causes. To effectively and efficiently find the right one, we use a top-down and MECE approach. So we don't go to the granular level right away. In fact, we break down the big problem into big branches in a MECE fashion. This is called an issue tree. See our MECE and framework video for more details on an issue tree. Element number 4. In order for each branch to exist in the issue tree, there has to be a chance that the root cause is in that branch. Or in other words, for every branch there must be at least one hypothesis associated with it. So let's see a simple example to explain this. If you're trying to solve the problem of, say, what smartphone to buy, following insight number 3 above, you draw an issue tree based on phone origins: US phones, Japanese phones, Korean phones, and Chinese phones. If you know that Chinese phones are bad, you don't like them, and you'll absolutely never buy one, then don't include Chinese phones as a branch in your issue tree. This may sound obvious, but don't be surprised to see this getting a lot more complicated and confusing, especially in qualitative and vague cases. You'll see great examples of them in the end-to-end program. Element number 5. Now assume we have a structured, MECE, and hypothesis-based issue tree. Pick the best hypothesis, or, in other words, choose a big branch to begin with. Then test if the root cause is in that branch. Notice that at this point, usually we cannot identify the exact and granular root cause yet. The goal here is just to see if the root cause is in this branch or not. Element number 6. Depending on each case, different methods are used to test the hypotheses. But generally, a powerful tool is to use benchmarks. Two main types of benchmarks are historical and competitors' data. Element number 7. If data suggests that the root cause is indeed in the testing branch, go down one level deeper and repeat the same process, breaking down the branches into sub-branches in a McKinsey, hypothesis-driven way and test each sub-branch using data. Element number 8. At any point where the data suggests that the root cause is not in the testing branch or sub-branch, move to a parallel branch or sub-branch on the same level. Element number 9. Keep doing this until the whole issue tree has been covered or until the interviewer would like you to switch gears. Element number 10. Lastly, once you have identified one or many root causes, think of solutions to fix them. If you're a logical geek, you may notice at this point that the above principles are mostly applicable for problem-based types of case questions. I have this problem and I need to know how to fix it. For other types of case questions like, should I do A or B, or how do I do C, the game is a little different. But if you apply the same spirit, the above elements can be easily customized. For example, if the case question is, should the NBA enter the Asia market? We don't need to find the root cause. Instead, we set up the high-level hypothesis. Say yes, they should enter Asia. Then we draw an issue tree to test that hypothesis. Now, each branch does not necessarily have to have a second-level hypothesis, but each branch still has to be a supporting fact to the big hypothesis. Branches still need to follow the McKinsey principle. Otherwise, the big hypothesis cannot be logically proven or disproven. And that's it. Technically, if you apply all these elements of consulting problem solving, any case can be nailed. But wait a second. Many of you at this point will ask, okay, I got it, but why do I still get stuck in cases sometimes? And that's a great question. Yes, in theory, the above approach always works, but the following two conditions must be met. Condition number 1, each and every single part of the issue tree must be perfectly McKinsey. Let's look at an example of a movie theater. Suppose that after a movie show, there's an anonymous feedback that the sound was bad from his or her spot. As a theater's consultant, you divide all seats in the theater into 3 areas, left, middle, and right. No matter how much investigation and testing you do, you still can't find the root cause. It turns out that the anonymous customer was in the disability area. The original breakdown was not McKinsey, or more specifically, not exhaustive. Sometimes it can be really hard to be perfectly McKinsey for the whole process. Condition number 2. The issue tree, or in other words, the breakdown, must somewhat properly isolate the root cause. For example, in the theater example that we just used, if unfortunately seats with audio problems were in fact the seats in the back, then breaking them down into left, middle, and right areas will give any candidate a hard time tracking down the problematic seats. Testing each branch of the issue tree would only yield weird results. You'll find the partial problems in each branch and cannot isolate the problem unless you adjust the issue tree or use another framework. Well, here are a few tips to meet those conditions. 1. Make sure you understand the concept of McKinsey really well. Please refer to our McKinsey video for more details on how to do that. 2. Try to improve your business intuition in order to be able to pick good frameworks or to correctly draw spot-on issue trees. In fact, we've devoted a whole ebook in our end-to-end program just for that. And 3, most importantly, develop the habit of aligning with the interviewer. No matter how good you are with the 2 tips above, there will always be cases that are hard to be McKinsey inside and out, and hard to draw frameworks that are spot on. So in that case, the interviewer is actually a great resource you can use. Okay, now that you've grasped the concept of problem solving just like in management consulting, let's talk about the candidate-led case interview. Question. Okay, so if a case interview is a simulation of an actual consulting project, what roles do the candidate and the interviewer play? In case interviews, think of yourselves as both an analyst in the team as well as the engagement manager. When you lay out the approach, draw the framework, and form hypotheses, you are doing the leadership job. But on the other hand, you also conduct the analysis, gather data, work on math, etc., and these are all analyst roles. The interviewer usually switches between being the client and being your boss. Sometimes he or she takes a very passive role, letting you handle the case on your own, and that's the client's role. Other times, the interviewer may intervene to guide you through the case. That's when he or she is in the role of your boss. Question. Okay, how about the flow of a candidate-led case? As you may guess at this point, the flow of a candidate-led case is somewhat similar to the logic of how problem-solving in consulting works. Indeed, that's true. So here's the typical flow. First, the interviewer gives the candidate a general case context and the key question. Usually it's in the form of a problem. For example, I have this issue. Can you help me? Other times, it's in the form of a more open-ended question like, how do I do A, B, and C? Second, the candidate often repeats back the case context and key question. After that, the candidate asks clarifying questions if needed to make the case context and key questions as clear as possible. At this point, most candidates ask for a timeout to think of a framework or to sketch out an issue that can try to tackle the problem. Coming back from the timeout is usually a mini working session between the candidate and the interviewer to go into the detail of the overall framework, and during this there may be some math and data analysis involved. Lastly, when the candidate has gathered sufficient insights about the case or simply when he or she is out of time, the interviewer will ask a synthesizing question. Usually it's in the following format, like, if you have 1 minute to speak to the CEO now, what would you tell him? Question. Okay, great. How about sharing a real example of a candidate-led case? So many of you have asked about this very specific question. Everybody loves examples. This video is already too long, though, so please check out the link right here for a quick sample of one interview in our Case Interview End-to-End Secrets program, where you can find a lot more examples with insightful feedback and easy-to-follow video illustrations. Well, I hope this video has helped you to understand a lot more about candidate-led cases. This type of case can be hard in the beginning, but I promise that once you know it, it will be one of the most fun things you can do. This is true for myself, and it should be true for you too. At Management Consulting Prep, we believe everybody can make it to consulting. So, are you a subscriber?